this episode of Random Life in the beginning of the week, finally going back to the routine. So, the topic that I want to talk to you about that's coming up a lot in my coaching and as a recovering uh, people pleaser, I want to talk about people pleasing. And I think you may have heard this term. If you're not familiar with that term, don't worry. I will be talking about what that means and also some of the examples of how it shows up and why it's showing up and what can be done about it, right? So, people pleasing is a term that has been used lately, especially in my circle where I coach, and also I think in the personal development sphere. And the term really means that we as humans trying to adjust our behaviors, our expression of what we wanted to say, we adjusted in the name of harmony, in the name of not rocking the boat, in the name of not making someone angry or upset. Basically, we withhold things or we don't say things we actually wanted to say because of fearing someone else's reaction. Um, and this people pleasing is something that I am so familiar with from my own experience and from my own background. I could tell you, like, I don't know, thousands of examples from my own experience. I have recovered from it, but I still continue to detect some of the times and I notice why and how I'm doing it. So, some of the examples from my childhood is that my father used to be this very dominant figure in the family, and he used to make all the decisions in the family. So we would all, like as children, try to see whether he's in the mood for us to tell something or he's in a bad mood, so we wouldn't say anything, or we would say everything is okay, even though everything wasn't okay, right? So these are the some of the examples that you can relate to maybe, and all of this like very learned experience of how me tiptoeing in the family and trying to see if it's the right time, in quotes, right time meaning if he is in a good mood for me to be telling something or not telling at all, or telling it in a way that's so sugar coated that it's not really clear what it is exactly. It's so diluted, right? So these are the examples from my childhood. What I have realized from all of these examples is that by the time I grew up, I didn't really feel like I didn't really know who I was because I was always trying to adapt to so many different situations. I didn't really stand for things that I really believed in because I was afraid someone will say something, someone will not like what I say, right? It will be immediate reaction of me saying, "Oh my God, I need to now change what I'm going to say. I need to reformulate, even though that maybe does not come out the way I want to, or not say anything altogether because just believing that whatever I'm going to say is not going to be valuable, it's not going to be as important. And therefore, not only that I would be standing by my position, but at most of the times I would just be willing to let go of my position or not even present my position because of fear that my position will not be accepted, will not be heard, will not be even, or maybe will be disputed or discussed or questioned, and I'm not able to defend it, and therefore I don't even go into presenting my position, right? So this is how the result of that people pleasing was for me. Now, in the work setting, I hear many of my humanitarians have these type of examples where they are people pleasing even though they don't want to, right? Some of them is when the boss calls on the weekend or after working hours and saying, "I can rely on you and to get this done or to make this report or to make these numbers," and then us going jumping onto a computer and start doing it even though we had other plans in that moment, and us not being able to say no to that boss's request or phone call, or not even like not picking up a phone call feels a lot difficult, and we start feeling like, oh my god, what the boss is thinking now if I don't pick it up. and the all drama starts happening. And all of these are examples of people pleasing, right? So the other examples is when another client of mine says that he wanted to do some presentation during a work meeting for all the colleagues, and then the boss said something like, we need to go in this direction. And then he felt like all of his arguments for what he was trying to show, how going in that direction is the wrong one or not the useful one or not the one that we should be going. But because the boss already said before the meeting how things should go, and then he felt like he couldn't really present all his arguments because it was all decided. Right, so therefore feeling like I didn't really say the truth of what I wanted to say, or I didn't really make my professional opinion known because the boss, the head of office or head of the organization made this directional change or said this is how it's going to go. Then all the other points were found void for him. So that's why he didn't really say all of those things. And then feeling so frustrated about it, feeling like my opinions are not really valid, or they're not really heard, or they're not really important because someone else makes a final call or the decision anyway, right? So these are the feelings that we start generating. The other of my humanitarian colleague was saying that this type of people pleasing comes in very subtle ways, right? In subtle ways. So, for instance, the boss being a very harmony seeking person and then wanting everyone to get along, wanting everyone to just be peaceful and have great relationships with each other, and then she feels like she wants to discuss certain issues with other colleagues she has, but her supervisor always wanting everyone to be like not creating problems basically, and she not feeling like she doesn't want to be the troublemaker basically in the team, and therefore she just keeps her mouth shut, or she doesn't really raise anything, and she keeps feeling this resentment. She keeps feeling this um, unfairness, that things are not really looked at the truth or at the bottom of what's happening, but rather everything is covered with let's all get together, let's all get along well, and doing our job. Let us all be very nice to each other and then just do the job without really looking into what's actually happening between those people or in the teams, right? So these are the examples of people pleasing, and I think I have given you like plenty of examples to relate to. Now, what we see is that when we are people pleasing, that this often leads to not only feeling frustrated and disappointed that we didn't really express what we wanted in the way we wanted, we didn't really express it, we didn't really say, we didn't really react in the way that we wanted. That keeps leading us to feeling all this frustration and anger and disappointment, right? But also the part that I really want to bring your awareness to is it also we also keep sending ourselves the message that being truthful, being honest, standing by our truth, standing by our position is not really a good thing, or is not really something that we want to be doing because of fear of someone else's reaction. Therefore, we start eating up our trust. We start destroying our trust in ourselves, right? Because our truthful self, our truthful being, or of who we are, cannot really be presented in that world, and therefore if that cannot be presented, then we feel like we're not really being ourselves. And then, therefore, we're not really being who we are or what we can do in the workplace. And then, therefore, we stop trusting ourselves of our opinions. And we don't even bring it to the surface anymore. Or we, even if we bring it in the way that's so like fragile sounding, so insecure maybe, and as soon as someone says something, we are ready to change our opinion, we're ready to withdraw our opinion. We are ready to even cancel our own opinion. And therefore, we start slowly eating up and destroying our own trust in ourselves. So this is, I find, the biggest consequences that unfortunately is very negative for ourselves, right? So therefore, um, when we start understanding why we people please, is basically we are doing that because we're afraid of certain uncomfortable feeling. We're afraid of someone else's reaction. And the reason why we're afraid of that discomfort or uncomfortable feeling from someone else's reaction is because we believe that we are the one causing that reaction, right? We believe that if we say something, the other person will definitely react in this way, and therefore we will have some sort of uncomfortable situation, and we're trying to avoid that, right? Now, in order to stop people pleasing, in order to stop doing those things, and in order to stop performing basically, but rather being ourselves and saying the things that we want to say, we need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling, and that's not always easy. B, we need to start separating who creates whose emotions, right? In other words, we are the ones creating our own emotions, they are the ones creating their own emotions, and we need to start separating them. As long as we keep them in the realm of we are the one creating their emotion and they're the one creating our emotion, then we will not be able to stop people pleasing. So, how can we do that is by really understanding that we are the one in charge of our own emotions, in charge of our own thinking process, in charge of what we say, what we don't say. And then someone else hearing it will hear that, and then them processing it through their own minds, through their own experiences, through their own lens, and then they generate their own feelings. They could have generated different feelings, but if they choose to generate anger or upset, they are doing it themselves. And therefore, as soon as we separate those two, then we also realize that feeling uncomfortable is okay as well. There is nothing wrong with feeling uncomfortable. And we need to realize that when we are people pleasing someone, we're basically choosing comfort over truth, if you think about it. Because in that moment, when we didn't say the thing that we wanted to say to the supervisor, to the boss, to the spouse, whoever it is, right? If we didn't say it because we just wanted to be comfortable, we didn't want to be uncomfortable, in that moment, we're choosing comfort over who we are being, over what we wanted to say, which is our truth. So we are, as long as we keep choosing comfort over our truth, we continue not being ourselves. We continue betraying ourselves in some ways. We continue disrupting our trust. We continue destroying our trust, because in that moment, when we want to say the truth of what we want to say, but we are hiding it, or we are not telling it, we are sugarcoating it, we are reformulating it in a way that's actually not the truth. In that moment, we just keep telling ourselves the message that being who we are is not okay, is not good. Otherwise, if it was okay, if it was accepted, then we would have said it. But because we're afraid that it's not going to be accepted, it's not going to be well received, then we keep adjusting our behavior, adjusting our opinions, or adjusting of what we want to say, right? So therefore, the second skill that we need to develop is not only being okay with being uncomfortable, but also being uncomfortable while we tell our truth, and being courageous while we tell our truth, And even if we're afraid, still being able to tell our truth, that's the skill we need to learn. And that's a skill, like any other skill, it takes practice. So if we can manage at least two things, one is separate ourselves from the other person in the sense of we are the one creating our emotions for ourselves and they're the one creating for themselves, and we're not responsible for their reactions. It doesn't mean that we offend them. It doesn't mean that we disappoint them, right? And the purpose of us telling our truth is not to disappoint them or to offend them. Most of the time, the purpose of telling our truth is what's true for us in that moment. Now, how they receive is up to them. But most of the human beings, we want to control how they receive. And therefore, if we believe they're not going to receive well, in quote, whatever the well means, then we want to adjust our behavior automatically. We know the consequences of keep adjusting our behavior automatically is us at some point feeling like we're not really being who we are, we're not being truthful to who we are and what we do. And that's when the crisis starts, I find. And I have done that crisis myself, and I would love for everyone to avoid that crisis, which is when we feel like we don't really know who we are, we don't really know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we just feel like we're following everyone's opinion, or we're being this person who doesn't really have an opinion or who doesn't really stand by an opinion, and that person we don't like being usually. I have been that person and I don't want to be that person anymore. Therefore, I need to watch out when I am people pleasing and why I'm people pleasing it. Usually it comes from the thought of I can't be myself, or I can't really say this because it may offend or it may disappoint someone else. And if in those moments question it, is that really true? How will this offend someone else if this is our truth? We're not doing it to offend the other person. And I'm not suggesting that this means that we can go ahead and insult other people. No, I'm not even talking, I'm never talking about that violence, verbal violence, non-verbal violence. I am against all the violence. I'm not even talking about that, right? So, but in the work environment, for instance, if our opinion about the matter, about the subject matter that we're discussing for work purposes, if our opinion differs from the opinion of the other person, and we're not saying it because if we say it, they will be upset or they will be against it or they will dispute it or whatever. If we don't say it, then we're actually betraying ourselves in that moment by not saying, by not making our opinion as important as theirs, right? And that's the part when I'm saying that actually practicing saying it, even if we're afraid the other person will dispute it, or even if we're afraid the other person will say something against what we're saying that thing is so important, because that way we are showing ourselves that our opinions matter as much as their opinion. And we are ready to stand by our opinion or maybe discuss our opinion, even if maybe we don't even stand by it, but we're ready to discuss it, to hear different opinions, is when the conversation, the real conversation, the honest conversation starts happening. And what it also does is, I'm so like amazed, is when we are ready to be uncomfortable for the sake of telling our truth or for the sake of telling our real opinion of what's happening, we also invite other people to be truthful as well. Because I noticed that whenever I was in the past this harmony seeking person who says, I can't really deal with any conflict situation or any disagreement in opinions, I can't really deal with it, then of course I would never have truthful conversations with people, because other people would feel like they can't really say these things to me because I keep sending these messages to everyone that I like being in harmony, and I don't like any disagreed opinions, right? And then I also invite people who are not really saying those truthful things to me. But now that I'm learning how to stop people pleasing and telling my truth in the way that's non-threatening, in the way that is calm, in the way that is, this is my truth, this is how I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling. When I'm saying these truths in the most genuine way, I also see that how others are invited to say their genuine truths as well. And whenever I can open up the space for feeling uncomfortable or feeling afraid, but still saying the things that I really want to say, then I am opening up this space also, maybe sometimes a bit vulnerable, space for other people to share, other people to say their things, even if they feel vulnerable in that moment, but they're ready to say that truthfully, openly as well. And that's when the real connection starts happening. That's when the real conversation starts happening, the genuine conversation that's removing the mask or removing the performing act, but rather genuinely wanting to discuss with each other instead of keep wanting to agree with someone just because that person um, is a dominant character in that environment, or the person has a certain hierarchy in that environment, and us all believing that we just need to keep going towards that direction just because we don't want to upset that person, we don't want to go against that person, or we don't want to appear as troubleshooters, excuse me, troublemakers or whatever. And I'm also noticing that there is this distinction that when we're not good at standing by our truth, when we're not good at really expressing what we really want to express in that moment, we tend to go to the other extreme, which I have noticed in myself so many times. And the other extreme is coming up very defensively, coming up saying all of what I want to say in the way that's like, I have to say this truth because I didn't have a chance to say it, but now I have to, and I need to defend it. I wish that no one really attacks my position. And then we get into this very attacking or defensive mode. And that also disrupts a lot of the communication with other people, connection with other people, because other people can feel when we're feeling defensive, right? Other people can feel when we are attacking. And therefore, if we don't want to be on that extreme of like on the one hand being the person who does not say things or says things only in the way that's in line with other people's opinions, right? From being from that extreme to the other extreme of saying things, saying our truths, but in the way that's very disruptive, that's very defensive, um, shows that we might be trying to stop people pleasing, and that's amazing, but we might be going to the other extreme of um, wanting to defend our opinions immediately, wanting to uh, like needing everyone else not to disagree with us, and if they do disagree, then us immediately going and attacking them, right? Not going to that extreme as well, because that's not going to help the conversation to the constructive outcomes that we want. Therefore, what we really want is going to the place where expressing our opinions, expressing what we really want in the most truthful, genuine way, and also standing by it, but also being open to discussing it, being open to hearing other people's opinions about it if we want to. If we don't, also setting boundaries as to, I don't want to hear opinions about this because this is what I really want, or this is how I see it, this is how I want to get things done, right? Maybe at work settings it will not really work, but in personal matters, maybe this is how you want to phrase it. But saying it all from this trust, And that's what I find the most important part is when we are stopping people pleasing, saying all the things from really genuine like trust of this is my truth, this is how I see it, this is how I want to do things, or this is how I don't want to do things. And then saying it in the grounded, trusting way. And then also trusting the other people receive it. And if they don't, then getting curious as to why, and then discussing those with them, right? This way we invite, so we stop people pleasing, and also we stop like hoarding our opinion, or defending our opinion, or attacking our others for questioning our opinion, right? Instead of doing that, or people pleasing, but we're in the place where we're owning our truth, we are trusting our truth, we are expressing it the way that we think is how it should be. And then we're also getting opinions or feedback or discussing it if we're open for it. If we're not, also getting curious as to why we're not open for it, right? That's the place that I really want you to transition to being the person, so that every time you send yourself the message that you can trust your opinion, you can trust being who you are in the world, and create genuine connections, relationships with other people without worrying about how they're seeing it, how you should be following what they're saying without ever questioning it, or how you can't be a troublemaker, or all of those things. So that's why, my dears, I would love to invite you to work with me on exactly this skill of separating our opinions, our emotions from others, learning how to be really ourselves by also being uncomfortable where needed, by saying things that we want to say, even if we're afraid, but always saying it from this trustful, grounded place so that we can stand by our position if we wanted to. And the same way, then we know best how to stand by uh, defending or protecting rights of other people who are in that space, who are wanting to have our assistance in that. I'm standing by what the justice we want to fight for, and standing by that. And that's really what I want to invite you to come coach with me, so we can get you to the place where you feel like not only you are being you in the workplace, in your relationships, but also you're standing by what you find the most important, and therefore being in integrity with yourself, in integrity with what you do. So, and of course, have the impact you want to create. So, my dears, have an amazing week, and it was a pleasure talking to you. Today was a bit longer than I expected, but I think it was a very useful one for you to think about. Where in your life are you people pleasing? Where in your life, by people pleasing, you are forgetting yourself, or you are ignoring your own truth? And how can you get to really owning your truth and expressing that in the world? That's the work I want to do with you. Have an amazing week. See you very soon.